Hey guys, ChrisFix here, and today I'm going to show you how to replace a water pump in a car. This is my dad's daily driver. He uses it to go back and forth to work, and one day when he was pulling out of the driveway, I noticed coolant leaking out from underneath his car. Luckily we caught this before he left because with his long commute, the coolant would have probably run low and the car could have overheated. So we popped the hood, and I knew the leak was coming from the driver's side area, so I took a look over here, and you can actually see some of the coolant leaking out and pooling over there. And if we take a closer look right over at the water pump, you can see the water pump is soaked in coolant, and it's leaking from the weep hole, which means the bearing seal is bad. So that means that we need to replace the water pump. Now, out of curiosity, I contacted the local Jaguar dealership and asked them how much it would cost, and take a guess. It was $843 to replace the water pump, gasket, and add some new coolant. So the whole point of this video is to show you guys that you could do this at home and save yourself a ton of money, and we're not going to be doing anything crazy. We don't have to jack the car up. This is a relatively simple job, and we're using all common tools. Let me show you what we're using. Now, the first thing you want to do is always get those safety glasses on. Now, for an $843 job, there's really not that many tools and products that you need. In this case, we have a torque wrench, 2 sockets, a ratchet, a wrench, some thread locker, a gasket scraper, a scouring pad, and a flathead screwdriver or pry bar. And then we have our water pump. I got this water pump for 40 bucks. It's a decent quality one. It came with the gasket. It'll work just fine. We do have a drain pan just in case we need to drain the coolant or catch the coolant. We have a no-spill funnel, and of course we have the proper coolant. Now, it's very important that you use the correct coolant, otherwise you could damage your engine. And to check what coolant your car takes, just check the owner's manual and it'll tell you right in here. You could also check the bottle and the labels on the bottle. You could see right here, it says it's good for Jaguars 1997 and up. We have a 2003, so this is perfect. And that is all you need. Now we could go and get started. Now, anytime you go work on a car, especially the cooling system, you want to make sure the car is cold. You don't want to work on a hot vehicle. The cooling system is pressurized when the vehicle is hot. You don't want that scalding hot coolant coming shooting out at you when you're removing that water pump. So I let this car cool down. It is now ice cold. And now we could get started on removing that water pump, which is down there. So in order to get more access over there, the first thing we need to do is to remove the battery. So let's remove the negative cable from the battery first. Good. Now we can remove the positive cable from the battery. And finally, let's remove the battery. And we could also remove the battery box as well. Now look at all the space we have to work on our water pump. Next, we need to remove the belt because it wraps around the water pump. It also wraps around this pulley right here, which we're gonna have to remove so we can get to the water pump bolts. So grab a wrench and get it on the bolt of the tensioner pulley and pull downwards to relieve the tension of the belt. And now we can easily get the belt off the pulleys so it's out of our way. Next, we need to remove this pulley so we can get to the bolts behind the pulley which hold the water pump in. There's 3 bolts here holding the pulley in. So let's remove the bolts by breaking it free and then loosening it up by hand. Good. And do the same for the other bolts. And these are small 8mm bolts, so they're pretty easy to break free and remove just like that. Then we could remove the pulley completely. So with everything out of the way, we could get to all 8 bolts holding our water pump in. But before we go and remove the water pump, the next thing most people are going to want to do is drain your entire cooling system. So go to the radiator, drain the radiator, get all that old dirty coolant out of here, because old dirty coolant with a new water pump is just going to ruin that new water pump. In this case, I drained the coolant and flushed the system not too long ago. So it'd be a waste for me to drain the entire system and have to refill it. So instead, what I'm going to do is I have some drain pans here. We're going to slide these underneath the car, and that's going to catch any coolant that comes out when I remove the water pump. I'm not going to drain the entire system. Again, you only want to do this if your coolant is clean and new. I really don't think that much coolant's going to come out of here. This water pump is pretty high up on the engine and pretty high up on the radiator, so we might only lose a gallon, maybe even less. That's going to save us money, and also that's going to make it so we have less coolant to recycle. So now let's go remove that water pump. These bolts are all 8mm, and they should come out pretty easily. Just like that. Now, water pump bolts could be different sizes, so what I like to do, notice it's in this spot on the water pump right here. As we remove each bolt, I like to take each one at a time and put it in the same exact spot on the new water pump. That way we can't lose track of where the bolts go. This will make installing the new water pump a lot easier. So now we can remove the rest of the bolts, and it doesn't matter what order you remove them in, just make sure you keep track of them. And check out how long this bolt is. And now you can see why it's important to keep track of each specific bolt, because sometimes they could be different sizes and go in specific holes. Another thing to pay attention to as you're removing bolts, make sure you don't see any coolant coming out. If you see coolant coming out of the bolt holes, mark those bolts because you're going to have to add some thread sealer on there so that you don't get coolant leaks when you're installing it. In this case, every single bolt came out dry, so we know this isn't threaded into any coolant passages, but it's just something to keep in mind. So let's unscrew this last bolt and remove it. Now let's try to pop this water pump off. Beautiful. And look at that, the coolant looks clean. Also, it doesn't look like we're getting a lot coming out, which is perfect. So out with the old and in with the brand new. Now before we go and install the new water pump, we need to go back to where the water pump mounts and clean all the old gasket material off of this machine surface. Now to do that, I do not recommend using a metal gasket scraper. If you grab an edge or something and gouge into that metal, it'll cause a leak. Instead, use a plastic scraper. No matter how hard I try, plastic isn't gonna cut into metal, so I don't have to worry about scratching or damaging that surface and then causing a leak. So remove all of the gasket material from here so it's nice and smooth. And this gasket is coming off really easily, but if you're having a hard time getting it off, using a little bit of brake cleaner helps remove the gasket. Good, once we remove all the gasket material off the machine surface, then you want to grab a scouring pad and just do one final cleaning around the entire machine surface and make sure it's smooth and clean, so when we install the new water pump, we won't have any leaks. The gasket will seat up against that nice and flat. And then grab a towel and clean off that machine surface and clean inside the water pump just in case any gasket material fell in there. You wouldn't want that to circulate through the engine. Now we can install our brand new water pump, and what I like to do is I like to grab the two long bolts since they're different, get them in there, but you want to grab any two bolts so that you could hold the gasket in place and also align this properly. So with those two bolts in, now we could get our gasket and slide our gasket in just like that so everything's aligned. And we're ready to install this. Now, if your water pump doesn't come with a gasket, you could use RTV gasket maker. So you're gonna just spread the gasket material around and that would work as well. Don't use RTV if you already have a gasket. That's like putting two gaskets together. It's just a waste. Also, if you're gonna be using RTV, make sure you're getting one that's compatible with coolant. Otherwise, the coolant will eat away at the RTV and then you'll get a leak. You can see this one's for water pump and thermostat housings, so it's compatible with coolant. But again, ours came with a gasket, so we don't need to add any gasket maker. We could install this dry just like that. So let's go get this installed. Now for all the water pump bolts, I'm gonna be using medium strength thread locker. That way the bolts don't loosen up from all the vibrations of the engine. And using the two bolt trick to align this makes it really easy to get that water pump straight in. Now just hand tighten both of these bolts all the way down, and that'll hold the water pump and gasket in place just like that. Now we could go and hand tighten the other 6 bolts, get them all in place, which will set us up for torquing everything down. Alright, with all these bolts hand tightened, now we're gonna torque them down. And it's very important we torque them down in a crisscross pattern. So if we start right here, we're gonna move across to the other side, and then from here we're gonna go to the other side, and we're just gonna go across and then tighten it down like that. Tightening in a crisscross or star pattern will allow the water pump to cinch down on that gasket evenly and mount to the engine surface nice and straight so we don't have any leaks. So torque each bolt down to 8 foot-pounds, which isn't a lot, but usually water pump bolts don't get tightened too much. And every time I torque one down, I'm gonna mark it just so I know it's torqued. Good, now our water pump is completely installed. It's that simple. Now let's real quickly get that other pulley in place and then hand tighten the 3 bolts that hold that in, and each of those bolts do have thread locker on them. These get torqued to 8 foot-pounds as well. Good. Next we could add our belt, and now's a good time to replace your belt if your belt is old. This is actually pretty new. I replaced it last year and it's still in good shape, so I'm gonna reuse it. So let's just get this around 2 of the pulleys. Get a wrench on our tensioner, loosen the pressure on the tensioner, and slide the belt over the pulley. Good. And you just want to make sure that the belt is centered on each pulley and not riding along the edge. And that looks good on all 3 of those pulleys. So we are done over here. Now we need to go and install the battery. So let's get the tray in place, and then the battery snaps in so it doesn't move. Next we could connect both battery wires and tighten down the positive wire so it's snug and doesn't budge. And then tighten the negative wire so it's tight. Good. So with both cables connected and our battery secured, the last thing to do is to fill the engine up with coolant. And we're gonna do that right over here at the reservoir. So remove the cap. If you have a radiator cap, then you'd fill from the radiator, but in this case we don't, so we fill from here. But you wanna make sure before you start the engine, definitely add coolant, because if you don't, you'll run the water pump dry and that could damage it. So you just did all that work for nothing. So we're gonna add our coolant. And something that helps a lot when filling the cooling system is a Spillproof funnel. This is gonna help us make sure that we get all the air out of the system. It makes it really easy to bleed. It comes with all these adapters, so this one will work for the Jag. Just put the adapter in and tighten it down. And then we can attach our funnel to that. Now before we go to start the car, make sure you get the correct antifreeze and fill the funnel up to about 3/4 of the way. And all those bubbles that you see bubbling out, well, that's good. That's air escaping the cooling system. And that's why I like these Spillproof funnels so much. It makes it so easy for all the air to be removed, because you could fill it up to here with coolant, and that is now the highest point in the cooling system. So any air that's trapped in here that's getting pushed out is gonna get pushed out up into the funnel and out into the air instead of getting recirculated back through the cooling system. The goal is to bleed the air out of the system to remove all the air. We don't want any air in here. That creates hot spots, and that isn't good. So that's why I like using these. And you can see that there's no more bubbles anymore. So now we're gonna go start the engine. That water pump is gonna force all the extra air that's in there out, and it's gonna suck up any coolant that it needs. So we just need to pay attention over here and add more coolant if this goes down. So let's go start up the car. And with the engine running, now we're just gonna let all the air bleed out. And as we wait for that, it's a good idea to check to make sure everything that you did is good. Make sure there are no leaks over here. The belt is good, it's running fine. We could also go under the vehicle. You wanna look for any drips down here, which means that there are leaks, and I don't see anything at all, which is perfect. So now all we have to do is let this do its thing. You want to get the car to operating temperature so the thermostat opens. It's also a good idea go inside of the car and keep an eye on that temperature gauge. Sometimes what could happen is air gets trapped in the engine and the engine will actually overheat. So just check this every once in a while. Another thing that you could do is after it runs for a few minutes, bring the revs up a little bit. Go up to 2000 RPM, get that water pump spinning more, and that's gonna force the air out even more. All right, 20 minutes later, we're not getting any bubbles at all out of here. The engine is at operating temperature, so we could put our stopper in here, push that down. Then we could simply remove the funnel and there are no spills or leaks. And remove the funnel adapter as well. And finally tighten the cap. And with that cap tightened all the way down, we are done. That is how you replace an old leaky water pump with a nice new one. They wanted $843 to do this, and we just did it for under 60 bucks. It's not only about saving money, but that feeling of accomplishment, the feeling of getting your car back running, doing it yourself, and we did it in under an hour. That is just such a good feeling. Now there's one more thing that we need to do, and that is to recycle the old coolant. I use an empty coolant bottle, and make sure you mark it waste coolant and just pour the old coolant into the bottle. This could be brought to your local parts store, recycle center, or mechanic shop to be properly recycled for free. And it's important to seal the old coolant and don't let your pets get near it because it's poisonous. So make sure you don't leave it in an open catch can. Now we can take this to be recycled. And with that, we are done. That is how you replace a water pump in your car. Save yourself a ton of money. I hope the video was helpful. If it was, remember to give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider hitting that subscribe button for more how-to videos just like this. And as always, all the tools and products are linked in the description so you could easily find them.